At the time of this recording, The Mandalorian Season 3 just finished, which I think makes now the perfect time to do a little retrospective on Star Wars. And by that, I mean Disney's Star Wars. It's spring 2023, so it's been just over 10 years since Disney acquired the franchise. So please join me on this adventure, where I take you back to the past, when Star Wars movies kicked ass. As I go over all the new movies, shows, and some video games, I won't be going over the myriad of novels, books, and comics because that'll just be way too much to cover in an entertaining way. That being said, be warned that this video and all other videos in this series will be filled with spoilers, as I will give my opinions as a fan of this material. I've been a Star Wars fan since I was about 9 years old, but now as a cynical 25-year-old man, I like to think that my critical views are much more nuanced than "Durr, lightsaber, cool, yay." Which is why you're watching me, right? No? No. Well, all the same, let's get into it, shall we? When Disney bought Lucasfilm back in 2012, Star Wars looked like this. We had the original trilogy, which covered the hero journey of Luke Skywalker, the prequel trilogy, which is all about the rise of the Empire and the fall of Anakin Skywalker, and the Clone Wars animated show, which focuses on, you guessed it, the Clone Wars. There are also a plethora of video games, comics, books, and other stuff. In fact, the stuff outside of the 6 films was referred to as the expanded universe. If you look at it on the timeline, you can see that there's not a lot of room for Disney to make their own material. This is especially true for all the material post Return of the Jedi, in which the lore had been established for decades. And in this material, the New Republic fights the remnants of the Empire, Palpatine comes back to life, Luke forms a new Jedi Order, and an outer galactic race called the Yuuzhan Vong attacked the galaxy. In the latter event, Chewbacca was killed off. Now look at this, and pretend to be in Disney's shoes. You just bought this franchise for 4 billion Fortnite bucks. And not only do you have to work within all this stuff, but you can't even use Chewbacca past a certain point. Not a good prospect. Not worth your money. So Disney makes the executive decision that shook the fan base to its core. They declare that, from this point on, only the 6 Star Wars films and the Clone Wars TV show are canon. All other material, all 35-ish years of supplemental material, are now gone. They are now considered Legends material. Just to clarify, this now means that Star Wars has 2 timelines, Legends and canon. A simple way to understand this is that Legends is the expanded universe pre-Disney, and the canon is the expanded universe post-Disney. Legends material would no longer be worked on, with exceptions such as the Old Republic MMORPG. Of course, this made a good number of fans upset, that all of this stuff doesn't quote-unquote count anymore. And as a fan of Legends, I do completely understand this change. If I were in Disney's shoes, I would do the same thing. If not, maybe let those Legend stories and series have an organic ending. And that doesn't mean that Legends doesn't count, there's no point in consuming it, because that's not true. If you're a deep enough fan to Star Wars, deep enough to the point where you want more than just the movies or the shows, there are some quote-unquote truth to Legends.
There's always a bit of truth in Legends.
Aside from the high-quality storytelling and a lot of this stuff, there are some interesting things that are introduced from Legends that make their way to the movies and even the new canon, such as Coruscant, Grand Admiral Thrawn, the New Republic, the Old Republic, Darth Bane, Aayla Secura, double-bladed lightsabers, kyber crystals, holocrons, and even the idea that the Emperor cloned himself in the event of his death. And those are just a few of the things that are still or were made canon by Disney. As far as which timeline I'd prefer, it depends on my mood that day. I like Legends for the reason mentioned earlier, as well as how tight-knit the lore was. I see Legends as sort of like a brick wall, all lined up to support each other. And I see canon as a mountain range, all peaks different enough, some highs, some lows, but they all form the same skyline. Both have their share of brilliant moments and some stupid stuff. Unfortunately, this decision led to some extreme opinions in the fanbase. There are some Legends fanboys that say that Disney needs to get rid of the current story and bring it back, even to the point of trying to fund a billboard in California so that the people working on Star Wars can see a giant Save Legend sign or something. That is actually true. There are also some die-hard canon fans that claim that all of Legends was all crap, and that these older fans are problematic and against the progressive angle of these new stories. As you can tell, I'm not the biggest fan of the Star Wars fan base, but to be honest, I don't like any fan base, but I'll get more into that when I cover Episode 8. Funny enough, when the Clone Wars originally aired, I was annoyed by how many times they contradicted the expanded universe. But just before the Disney buyout, I figured in my head that this is just a different retelling of the same war. And what we were getting was very good anyway, so who cares at the end of the day? Now, the topic of how the Clone Wars show contradicted a lot of the previously established lore, yet referencing it enough that it still counts, has been covered by many other YouTubers, including this video right here, which I would highly recommend you guys give a shot. That being said, perhaps this could be a topic for a new video. Fortunately, because the Clone Wars is now also considered canon, all the references to previous expanded universe lore are now canon. But speaking of the Clone Wars, how about I talk about something Disney did that I don't like? Just after the purchase, a lot of projects got canned, as to be expected when a major corporate change occurs. This means bye-bye to Battlefront 3, 1313, and Force Unleashed 3. The 1313 cancellation one burns a lot of the fans because of how different that video game would have been. It would have been a street-level game about being a bounty hunter on Coruscant. And what has been recently revealed is that Battlefront 3 was so close to being done before it was cancelled. So just add those things to the lost media pile. However, the biggest casualty here was the Clone Wars. Yeah, so the show aired on Cartoon Network, a competitor to Disney XD. It was 5 seasons in. Due to Cartoon Network and my assumption that they wanted to focus solely on the original trilogy material, and perhaps also that Clone Wars was just too violent for what they were going for, Disney canceled the show. Now keep in mind that this was just announced right after the Season 5 finale, when Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order. So at least the biggest question of where Ahsoka was during Episode 3 was sort of answered. But there would be so many arcs and stories that just hadn't concluded yet, leaving a lot of viewers to feel gypped. The Clone Wars is probably my second favorite TV show of all time, so I was a little bit sad, not gonna lie. There were still episodes to be finished. Some that were mostly finished, and others that just didn't get episodes but were written. So Disney did this. They aired Season 6 on Netflix, and Season 6 would feature the inhibitor chip arc where it's revealed that all the clone troopers have inhibitor chips in their brains that would come to play in Order 66. There was a 2-parter with Mace Windu and Jar Jar Binks. There was an arc dedicated to Anakin and Padme's relationship and how the Republic took over the banking clan. And lastly, the Yoda arc, when the mystery of Sifo Dyas, which was introduced in Episode 2, is answered, and Yoda learned from the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn about Dagobah and how to achieve sentience in the Force after death. Fun fact, that last bit was originally supposed to be in Revenge of the Sith, but didn't fit in with the story. The last episode of Season 6 ends on a bittersweet note, with Mace Windu asking Yoda if he learned anything about how the Jedi could win the Clone War. Yoda replies that he is not sure if anyone can truly win a war. Just by fighting in it, the Jedi have lost, but victory will be had in the end, just not in how they think it'll happen. There were 2 arcs not in Season 6 that were partially done but unfinished in the animation. The Crisis in Utapau and the Bad Batch arc. The former was about Grievous getting a big-ass crystal for the Sith, which would probably be part of the Death Star. In this arc, Anakin and Obi-Wan have a heart-to-heart about Ahsoka leaving, and how Anakin deals with it. A truly heartfelt scene which adds into Anakin slowly turning to the dark side. The Bad Batch arc is basically an arc that introduces the Bad Batch. Of course, we'll come back to that later. They also released a comic book called Son of Dathomir, which delved into what happened to Darth Maul after Sidious whooped his ass on Mandalore in Season 5, and how he gets out and faces Dooku. And it also shows the fate of Mother Talzin. There were 2 novels written from some of the last Clone Wars arcs, Ahsoka and Dark Disciple. Ahsoka but show her on the run after the Siege of Mandalore, an event first mentioned in Rebels, and also how she survived Order 66. Dark Disciple, which I've covered on this channel before, is the finale to Asajj Ventress' story arc, as she teamed up with Quinlan Vos to assassinate Count Dooku. Other arcs that didn't get made but were mentioned by the creators include a Boba Fett Cad Bane arc, where the two would face off in a shootout in which Bane nails Boba Fett on the helmet, hence the mark on top of it. We'll come back to that when we cover the book of Boba Fett. A Kashyyyk arc where the Bad Batch and Yoda team up to help out the Wookiees, hence the good relations with the Wookiees he has. There is another where the Yuuzhan Vong begin to probe the galaxy a la X-Files, a Top Gun tribute, and other stuff. In fact, the Ahsoka story arc was supposed to be more developed, where she would discover a Sith temple under the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. She'd be in good terms with the Jedi before the Siege of Mandalore took place. The creators stated that they had enough material, even today, that they have enough voice work and animation and material to get through seasons 8 and 9, but that'll probably never happen. Despite them canceling it, Disney has relied on the Clone Wars as the backbone to their expanded universe, similar to how the Thrawn trilogy was to Legends. This can be seen in Rebels and The Mandalorian. The essential bits of the Clone Wars show for the future are like this: Ahsoka being Anakin's Padawan, the portrayal of the clone troopers, various battles such as Ryloth, Hondo Ohnaka, Mandalore. Holy shit, the Mandalorian arcs in this show are essential going forward. Cad Bane, Darth Maul coming back, Saw Gerrera and Onderon, the public's portrayal of the Jedi, and the inhibitor chips on the clones. Alright, don't worry, I will shut up about the Clone Wars now. In the next part, I will cover something that Disney has made instead of taken away. This, of course, will be Star Wars Rebels. Star Wars Rebels was a show made for Disney XD, with a very different style of animation and storytelling methods, but some of the same writers and producers more or less. As you can see, this show prefers the style of Ralph McQuarrie's original concept art versus the wooden marionette style of the Clone Wars. It should be noted that I'm going to go over Rebels from the beginning to the end, but know that various things introduced by the movies at the time would be featured on the show, like characters, vehicles, yada yada yada. Because between the airings of seasons 2 and 4, Force Awakens and Rogue One would come out in theaters. But I'm not going to go back and forth because that would just be annoying for you guys. It's 14 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith, or 5 years before the events of A New Hope. The Empire rules the galaxy with an iron fist, but they aren't having it easy. Small rebel cells form and try to fend off the Empire and help out those who are oppressed by them. One of these cells meets up with young Ezra Bridger, an orphan street rat like Aladdin, and they take him in as part of the Ghost crew. The captain of the Ghost is Hera Syndulla, daughter of Sham Syndulla from the Clone Wars. We also have Kanan Jarrus, a Padawan survivor of Order 66. Zeb, a gruff Lasat who is one of the last of his race. Sabine Wren, a Mandalorian who used to work for the Empire but left. And Chopper, their astromech droid who's a little shit. If R2 is like a dog, Chopper is like a cat. They learn that Ezra is Force sensitive, and Kanan reluctantly teaches him how to be a Jedi the best he can, because Kanan himself wasn't a fully trained Jedi Knight, so he has his work cut out for him. We also get introduced to Imperial Security Bureau agent Callus, the smooth yet cunning Imperial officer who is tasked with capturing them for the Empire. Now this show is more serial than the Clone Wars. It only follows the Ghost crew, which both works for and against the show. It being told in order and focused on just the main characters leads to more focused character development. Bad news is, you better like these characters, because you're stuck with them. Personally, I found Ezra to be annoying at first. Same with Zeb. I found his basic tough guy brawler act to be cliche. Season 1 is more by the books, as in it has to introduce all these characters in the planet of Lothal. It's kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender in that regard. The show starts off with Darth Vader siccing the Inquisitors on any remaining Jedi. The Inquisitors become very important to other media in the future. In this season and the rest of the show, we also get cameos and appearances by other characters, such as, again, Darth Vader, the Emperor, Moff Tarkin, Lando, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Hondo, General Dodonna, Bail Organa, and Leia Organa, and even R2 and C-3PO make an appearance. Season 1 ends with them defeating the Grand Inquisitor, and finally meeting who the mysterious Fulcrum was. And, spoiler alert, it's Ahsoka. This finale was a huge deal to the fanbase, as it confirmed that Ahsoka had survived the Jedi Purge. Keep in mind that Ahsoka book mentioned earlier did not exist yet, so this was news. It also begins the notion of the rebel cells linking up and becoming stronger against the Empire. Season 2 begins with the Empire taking over Lothal, and the Ghost Crew going on the run. And while that happens, 2 more Inquisitors are sicked upon them, to make up for where the Grand Inquisitor failed. On their journeys, the Ghost Crew meet up with 3 old retired clone troopers, Gregor, Wolf, and of course the big man himself, Captain Rex. At first, he and Kanan don't get along because of Order 66, which leads to some good character moments. We also get character development of all the main crew members in this season. We see Hera and her father go against each other. Sabine meets an old friend and another Mandalorian, in which we learn about her past. And Zeb and Kallus have a moment of understanding. Kallus will start to become the Zuko of the show, if you know what I mean. That he'll be a turncoat against the Empire for the rebels. The Season 2 finale takes place on Malachor, where the gang is lured there by Maul, another Clone Wars survivor, who intends on using a powerful Force weapon there to destroy the Empire. Of course, he has ulterior motives. They do battle against the Inquisitors and kill them. Maul tempts Ezra to the dark side, and blinds Kanan with his lightsaber. The battle ends when Darth Vader finally faces his old apprentice, Ahsoka. This confrontation is the best part of the season, if not the whole show, and they aren't even the main characters. Ahsoka at first doesn't believe that this monster could be her former master, but soon learns otherwise.
I won't leave you! Not this time.
Then you will die.
Honest to God, chilling. The best drama in Star Wars revolves around Anakin Skywalker, I feel. I mean, what's worse, a rando being a villain, or your closest friend being a villain? The season ends with everyone escaping and licking their wounds. Season 3 starts with Ezra becoming an asshole due to the previous events. He's even called out by Hera for being reckless, something he has to learn to get over. Maul finds his way back to the Ghost Crew, and becomes a real menacing threat to them. He needs to combine his holocron with Ezra's in order to gain insight on how to defeat his enemy. During this, Sabine comes across the Darksaber, which Maul got during the Clone Wars. Of course, Maul isn't the only villain in this season either. Enter Grand Admiral Thrawn. This is what I meant that Legend stuff eventually comes back in some way or another. We get Thrawn, Rook, the Chimera, TIE Defenders, and a bunch of other little references of lore here and there. In fact, I'm going to take this time to highly recommend to all of you to follow the Twitter account known as Star Wars Connections. This account shows all sorts of small, tiny linkages between all the Star Wars media, from Legends to canon, from old pulp novels from the 70s to things you'll see today. Things that you'd think are just dummy baby words or nothing references are very consistently referenced all throughout Star Wars' existence. But yeah, Thrawn is no joke here. He is a threat till the end of the show. We also get Saw Gerrera to appear here and there. He's seen as the extremist, introducing the notion that some of these rebel cells are just terrorist cells. Something Disney does well is show that these bad guy groups aren't all that bad, and these good guy groups aren't all that righteous. A little bit of gray here and there. Also, as I mentioned before, Sabine gets the Darksaber and trains with Kanan on how to use the blade. We then see her family in a final showdown between her and Gar Saxon, the leader of the Imperial Mandalorian Commandos. The season also features a very important in-universe moment, Mon Mothma's declaration of open rebellion against the Empire, a moment that is amplified in awesomeness after you watch Andor. Of course, Maul would come back one last time. Both him and Ezra find their way to Tatooine, as apparently the key to defeating the Sith is there. Ezra meets old Ben Kenobi, who tells him to focus on what he and his people have to do, and not lose himself in ending all the pain or something. Maul and Obi-Wan have one last confrontation, and it's in my top 3 duel scenes of all of Star Wars.
If you define yourself by your power to take life, your desire to dominate, to possess, then you have nothing.
Maul at this point is just a failure. He's just a loser. spending his whole life on revenge he never truly understood. Obi-Wan harbors no ill will to him despite Maul killing his master and his former lover. Obi-Wan only raises his blade when Maul figures out that he's only here to protect someone, which is of course Luke Skywalker. And in 3 moves, Maul is struck down for the last time. Season 3 ends in a giant space battle between Thrawn and our leads, outside of Chopper Base. Something I will give Rebels credit for is that their space battles are really well done. Thrawn almost completely wins, if not for the competence of an Imperial officer under his command, which allows the Rebels to flee to Yavin 4, which is where Season 4 starts. Actually, that's not true. Season 4 starts on Mandalore, as the Ghost crew helps him fight off the Imperial presence there. We catch up with Bo-Katan Kryze, as this is where she first wields the Darksaber. By the way, the bombing of Mandalore mentioned in The Mandalorian, in The Purge, that all happens off-screen after this point in the show. But things take a turn for the worst, sad to say. Hera gets captured by Thrawn, leading Kanan and the rest of the crew to go and get her back. This is after, of course, Kanan goes through some spiritual character development and finds his peace. He sacrifices his life so that they all can escape. I won't lie to you, this death hurt. There's a handful of moments in Star Wars that make me feel the sad stuff. But when Chopper holds Hera's hand after they get back, I got choked up the first time. I'm man enough to admit it. Hera's grief from this was well done and realistic. She isn't stoic all the time. She's allowed to be weak and feel sad. Kanan was a G through to the end, and Freddie Prinze Jr.'s performance was well done. GG. Later on in the season, the Ghost crew would come across an old Jedi temple, which was related to the Force wielders, the father, the son, and the daughter. And from there, Ezra is taken to the world between worlds, a place outside of time, very mystic and makes sense within the confines of the universe, I would argue. It was there that Ezra is able to save Ahsoka. It was there that Ezra is able to save Ahsoka from a year or so in the past when she fought Vader by pulling her into the present. He then attempts to save Kanan, but is reminded that he chose to sacrifice his life for them, and that if this doesn't happen, they all will die, which is not what Kanan would have wanted. We even get an appearance from the Emperor. He'll be back in the finale, when the group has to rid Lothal of the Empire, who have done some damage to the planet. The Ghost crew is joined by all their friends and allies from all throughout the show, including Hondo and the Clone Boys. We sadly lose Gregor as he goes down fighting for a cause he chose. Big fat F for my boy here. The rest of the Rebel Alliance, however, doesn't get involved, as this is around the time in universe where they weren't ready for open warfare yet, or something. Ezra also sacrifices himself to defeat Thrawn by getting help from the space whales. Watch the show, it'll make sense. And they both go missing. The epilogue states that the Empire never screwed with Lothal ever again, and that the remaining crew members aided the rebellion till the end at Endor. Hera had actually been pregnant with Kanan's son, Jacen Syndulla. The last bit is Sabine and Ahsoka teaming up to go look for Ezra. While I don't think Rebels reached the high of Clone Wars, it's still really damn good. Animation isn't as good, in some ways. The violence is definitely less, but the show will bring you up and break your heart. I'd give this whole show a watch if you can. For Disney's first soiree into Star Wars, not bad at all. So Disney has Star Wars, which means that Marvel has the comic book rights, and now EA has the game rights. Yeah, uh-oh indeed. And their first offering is Star Wars Battlefront, a reboot of the Battlefront series. Made by the people who made Battlefield, this would be a recipe for success, right? Right? Well, let me say this. Having a PS4, I played this as it came out. The graphics were nutty, they were insane at the time. It's like Tatooine and Hoth and Endor and Sullust are all real places they got footage for, or something. The game is fun, for the first hour. And then you realize, oh no, this is the entire game, isn't it? EA was high as hell for selling this for $60. This is the Lay's bag of chips of games. Yeah, sure, there was DLC, but it wasn't free. Of course, now if you really wanted to, you could buy the whole game and DLC for cheap, like less than $10. But there's not much to say about this game, unfortunately. It's all multiplayer and no single player. A sign of death. While the technological achievements of the game were great, the game itself is very shallow. I wouldn't even say it's worth buying now because you can just play Battlefront 2 and get the same thing but with more content, you know? If it's free on like Game Pass, whatever, give it a shot. I was a senior in high school when the first trailer dropped for this movie. I remember not being sure if this was the real deal because so many fans had made up trailers for their own for a new Star Wars movie. But boy, there was some hype. Big hype. Seeing Kylo Ren's lightsaber for the first time, seeing the X-Wings fly over the water in a badass formation, seeing the Falcon fly into some TIE fighters. Good stuff. A later trailer was parodied by the hit show Gen Z.
Huey, we're home.
I moved away from my hometown to go to college, but I came back for Christmas break and saw it with my old pals. This was the first time seeing a true Star Wars film in theaters, and with my boys that made me a fan in the first place. It would not have been the same without you guys. GG, no re, indeed. Never mind that, but what is the premise and setting of Episode 7, this new Star Wars movie? Well, it's been 30 years since Return of the Jedi. The New Republic is the governing body of the galaxy, but they are under threat of the First Order, a post-Empire Imperial faction that seeks to weaken the New Republic and take over. Thus, the New Republic forms the Resistance to combat this looming threat. Han and Leia get together and have a boy, Ben Solo, who trains with Luke to be a Jedi. But he is turned to the dark side by the evil Snoke and kills his fellow students at Luke's academy. He then becomes Kylo Ren, and Luke, in shame, goes into exile. The main plot of this movie is the Resistance trying to find Luke Skywalker and beating the First Order to finding him, and also so they can blow up Starkiller Base, their Death Star ripoff. There are 4 major new characters introduced here. We start off with Poe Dameron, who is an ace pilot of the Resistance. He forms a friendship with ex-Stormtrooper Finn. In fact, Finn leads the story for the most part of this movie, except for when Rey comes into play. Rey is a loner from the desert world of Jakku, trying to find her place in this life. They all come to blows with Kylo Ren, which each of them confronts him at least once in this movie. I won't focus on recapping the movies too much since I know most of you have seen these, especially Force Awakens. This movie did well at the box office, and it makes sense why. This movie was meant to bring everyone back into Star Wars. It's not just a nerdy franchise anymore, it's for everyone. It's for families, for kids, for boys, girls, everyone. This is seen in the marketing as it tries its best to appeal to everyone. And the story of Force Awakens plays it generally safe too. It's a rehash of A New Hope, which is meant to give people what they generally consider Star Wars to be. It answers a lot of the criticisms that fans had about the prequels, including the overuse of CGI, the shit acting, the illogical storytelling, and the lackluster cinematography. The effects are mostly practical, and the acting is charming. The story is simple, and the shot composition was well done. J.J. Abrams directed it, and you can tell just by the lens flares and how the camera moves with the action. But what did I think? At the time, I was wowed by this movie, for those reasons. I was just in awe in the beginning, hearing the fanfare and seeing the opening crawl on the big screen for the first real time. I found all the characters to be interesting, especially Finn. In fact, Finn was my favorite character in this movie. I liked his cheesy overreactions, and using him as the audience viewpoint was genius. Poe was cool and had charisma. Rey was also a good lead as well. Her decisions and her agency helped the plot move forward. And to be perfectly honest, I'm going to mention a controversial subject here. I had to hear about the Mary Sue thing on the internet. I never really felt that with her. Sure, she got the hang of her powers quick, but it wasn't against the rules of the universe. And she wasn't OP per se. And after all the Chosen One arcs, and how Luke just happened to be let on Red Squadron to blow up the Death Star in the first movie, it wasn't that far-fetched. I'm not even the biggest Rey fan. I just don't harbor those negative feelings is all. I can partially understand, but not 100%. Having Han Solo be the old mentor figure to them was a good call, and his death at Kylo Ren's hands was truly tragic. It makes that last scene with him and Leia sad on 2 fronts. Kylo Ren, spoiler alert, is the best and only consistently good thing about the sequel trilogy. He's in a mask for the beginning part of the movie, and it was a refreshing thing that he's not a disfigured monster. He's just a scared little punk who's trying to be more like his gramps than his parents. All the acting is good, but Adam Driver plays Kylo Ren with such depth and subtlety and nuance. He's a villain who's hurting and has family problems. Very compelling stuff. The First Order is really cool too in their first appearance. They look like a future evolved version of the Empire, especially with their helmets. The story does lose me near the end, I will admit. It becomes a CGI fest after Han Solo dies. Although the fight between Rey and Kylo Ren is brutal. And it makes sense why they'd fight like that versus the prequel era when Jedi were trained and were oversaturated in their skill. Throughout all of her life, Rey had to fight with her staff, which isn't the same as the saber. And Kylo Ren, who had been trained by Luke Skywalker, has a different type of saber to use. So it makes sense why the fight wouldn't look as pretty or coordinated. Despite that the ending lost my attention, and that the movie's basically a remastered version of A New Hope, I still had a good time back then. I say back then because now I'm considering where this trilogy goes. But I still have those memories with my boys. And this film is competently made. As a matter of fact, this movie even impressed my dad, who prefers a more grounded, in-reality story. So all in all, this is a good movie. Worth a try if you haven't seen it, and there's a good chance you already have seen it. So there you go. The second Disney Star Wars movie made was this bad boy, Rogue One. The first Star Wars movie to not be an episode. The first spin-off, a Rogue One, if you will. And it's my favorite Disney one to date. It was Force Awakens, but after considering where the trilogy goes, this is it. I really dug this movie on release. That being said, what is Rogue One about? It is just before the events of A New Hope. Like maybe a week or so. A scientist in the Empire, Galen Erso, has made an attempt to get info out for a secret Imperial weapon, the Death Star. The rebellion, which was organized but operated in secret at the time, sends for the daughter of that guy, Jyn Erso, to try to get his info to the rebellion. In secret, they want to prevent him from finishing that and all future weapons for the Empire by any means. They have Cassian Andor and his droid co-pilot K2SO take her to Saw Gerrera, who knows about his location because his group of guys just captured an ex-Imperial pilot who transported Galen, Bodhi Rook. Along their journey, they come across a pair of Jedi acolyte kind of guys, Chirrut Imwe and Baze Malbus. They join the group and add some soul and heart to it. Meanwhile, Galen has to work under Director Orson Krennic, who in turn has to work under Grand Moff Tarkin in completing the Death Star. What follows is a story of twists, turns, and moral ambiguity. Before I gush about this movie, I'll just lay out the cons here, because it ain't perfect. The characters aren't as dynamic as what we got in Force Awakens. I don't mind that because not everyone in this universe is going to be the main character, you know? The issue with that is that they don't have much agency, especially Jyn. I don't think she makes any meaningful decisions in the entire movie. In the end, she makes a passionate speech about how the rebels need to fight, but it's Andor who actually gets a squad together and is like, fuck it, we are going in stealth. This movie also feels like a lot was cut out or reshot, and that can be seen just by the trailers alone. So much of the marketing feels like it was changed last second. Either that, or they shot footage just for the trailer and nothing else. There is also some questionable usage of CGI replicating actors, who either are long dead or are not what they used to look like. Lastly, while I like that this is basically a glorified fan film, there are some fan service moments that I find quite absurd. Like, why are Dr. Evanson and Pabu Baba on Jeddah?
You'll be dead guy. And Pundu Boo Boo. Panda Babu.
You mean Buttface?
And how lucky is it that they got out just before the city got destroyed? But yes, this movie, while having a soulless focus group making all the story decisions, like every Disney movie since the birth of Christ, did have the feel of being made by people who genuinely like Star Wars. 9 times out of 10, when you appeal to the lowest common denominator, which is just doing what the fans want, you don't really offer anything new or special to it. This movie doesn't have that issue.
It broke new ground!
It knows that we want all the flashy shit, especially in the end, but it does add new things. The grim, detailed settings and how filthy everyone and everything looks is a great contrast to all the clean but admittedly cool planets of the prequels. Each room shown in this movie feels lived in. The place where we first see Andor looks like a real shithole. Same with Jeddah. The prison that we first see Jyn in looks hopeless. And when she's in the Imperial Juggernaut, the Stormtrooper guard looks done. Armor all dirty, like, get me the fuck out of here, please, I beg you. The rebels look like they're just getting by. The ragtag vibe from episode 4 is achieved perfectly here. The characters all do the less is more thing. You don't really hear any sad origin stories besides Jyn's. Instead, Andor gives that great line, "I've been in this fight since I was 8 years old." And I'm just assuming that Chirrut and Baze are acolytes, because they mention the Force a lot, and there was a temple on that planet, but nothing is ever said to confirm that. And seeing Saw Gerrera in live action in this movie is the first time that a Clone Wars character has transitioned from animation to live action. But yeah, they keep bringing the character of Saw Gerrera back, even though he really wasn't that much of a character in the Clone Wars. But hey, it's Forrest Whitaker playing him, the guy from Ghost Dog. Orson Krennic is a Chad. In the first scene, he's told that Galen's wife died, and he's like, "Oh, that's sad. Anyway, troopers, go search the place." And then when they find her, he's like, "Oh look, Lyra, back from the dead. It's a miracle." So sardonically, and it's awesome. But he also gets screwed over by Tarkin, who takes over the Death Star from him, and ultimately kills him with it. The lore connections to the bigger picture, while not necessary, are a nice treat. The rebels are at Yavin 4, which makes sense. We have Mon Mothma and Basil Oregano.
Played by Jimmy Smits. He's Princess Leia's non-biological father. He got blown up on Alderaan.
Alderaan!
That's the planet that gets blown up.
They're played by their prequel actors, as well as General Dodonna. And on the Imperial side, we have this guy. The twist that the design flaw on the Death Star was intentionally done by Galen was a great choice. It makes its existence in Episode 4 that much better. Like, you know how the explanation of the exhaust port had to have been a last-minute decision for the script back in 1977. So this adds value to it. It retcons its meaning. That, and in Episode 4, they say that the plans were sent by transmission, but are physical. And this movie explains why that is too. It truly is a great companion piece to the original trilogy, in a way that the Clone Wars show was to the prequels. The idea being, while what the heroes do is mad important, it couldn't have been done without help from the little people, from the background characters. If you watch all the Star Wars content on Disney Plus in timeline order, you'd see that Rogue One serves not only as a prequel to Episode 4, but a finale or culmination of Rebels and Andor. The Andor connection is obvious, but Rebels is subtle. In the background, you can see the ghosts flying around, and even see Chopper rolling around. But the Hammerhead Corvette seen at the end battle, those come from Rebels, when Leia nabs him for the cause. And even the name Rogue One has a meaning. In this movie, it's the call sign for the group when they sneak off from the Alliance. But in Episode 5 and beyond, Rogue Squadron is led by Luke and Wedge during the battles of Hoth and Endor. We also learned that the reason why Bail Organa went to Alderaan for the events of A New Hope was to tell his people that it's time for war. But he also sends his daughter Leia to go get Obi-Wan on Tatooine to help out the rebels. Which, holy shit, after watching the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, that makes a lot more sense. But of course, Leia wanted to do a little sidetrack and help get the plans from Scarif. And luckily she did, or else we wouldn't have A New Hope. Alright, let's talk about the ending.
Star Destroyers! I'm gonna come!
When Jyn gives her speech, everything after that is Pog Champ. The action, the speeches, the sacrifices. It's all wonderful. The scene when Jyn tells the soldiers of what they need to do when they land on Scarif is well written. You truly feel like they are really against all odds. Andor's speech, after that, the whole make 10 men feel like 100 line, that sticks with me sometimes. After that is all explosions and gunfights and great action. And I'm going to say it, this is my favorite space battle in all of Star Wars. Hands down. Everything is so well laid out, and the camera follows these ships and the squadrons as they attack and bomb and destroy the shield generator. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't like the dogfights from the original trilogy. What they were able to do with models will, in some way, be more impressive than any CGI battle because of all the precise timing and model work that they had to do. But I feel in this movie, they really took advantage of the CGI and pushed it to its full potential. The energy is also electric in the final battle, as this is the first time in universe that the rebels outright attack the Empire. It's like they're saying to them, fuck you, you're not going to rule us forever, and we are willing to die to take you with us. And there's some good use of archived footage of Gold and Red Leader.
This is Gold Leader. We're starting for the target shaft now.
And I like that Red 5 gets nay-nayed. Rip in peace to all of Blue Squadron, of course, and all those U-Wings. I always say that Rogue One is like the Halo Reach of Star Wars, because the group of Rogue One all end up dying just so they can get the Death Star plans to the Alliance. Not all of them die ceremoniously either. Bodhi just gets killed by a grenade. But having these main characters give up their lives for the cause and for the MacGuffin of the next picture gives it that much more value. It's like playing Combat Evolved when you know that most of Noble Team died so that Cortana could exist. The last scene is great too. I know many people hate the Darth Vader scene in the hallway, like he's above doing the dirty work and so on. But something this important, like getting the plans, I feel like he would want to take care of that personally. Him slaying those poor rebel soldiers and how he does it makes sense too. He doesn't make any movements that contradicts the movies. He deflects bolts, chokes motherfuckers, and sliced and diced with grand strokes. The desperation of getting that disc out adds such urgency to the scene. The guy running with the plans while men scream in pain behind him. When deepfake Leia gets them and they hyperspace out of there, you feel safe and comfy and satisfied, like, yes, we are out of there and we have what we wanted, if for a brief moment. Damn, I love this movie. Of course, we can't talk about the ending of this movie without addressing the elephant in the room. Shortly after this movie came out, Carrie Fisher died. And while we have since lost the actors who played R2, Darth Vader physically, and Chewbacca, this was the first real Star Wars death that I have been alive for. And not to sound callous or heartless or anything, but celebrity deaths don't really hurt me that much. With some exception. I mean, everyone dies, celebrity and normal people alike. But this one hurt. I mean, she was the princess. She was Princess Leia, one of the big badass people in the universe. And Carrie Fisher was such a real personality. She was funny, she roasted people, she kept it real, you know? But, what can you do?
And in conclusion, Your Honor, I hope I slept with you to get the job, because if not, who the hell was that guy?
All in all, Rogue One is a damn fine movie. In some ways, a guilty pleasure. I definitely think it aged the best out of all the Disney Star Wars films. I'm not for the idea of spin-off movies in this franchise, but if you have to, make sure that they add something valuable to the universe. And Rogue One, a Star Wars story, did just that.